Next, we're going to talk about one of our favorite smaller Italian producers, a great old traditional Amaro and liqueur producer in Trento in the north of Italy, Antica Erboristeria Cappelletti. And everything you need to know about them and their history is really right there in the name. Antica, old. They're old. In particular, what we think of in the world of Italian liqueurs is if you come from before World War I, then you started in those kind of older traditions of using regional ingredients and often keeping a lot of different recipes around. And that's certainly the case with Cappelletti. Erboristeria means natural pharmacist. And in fact, Cappelletti established a shop in the center of Trento, the town that they're in. And it's still there. They don't own it, but a lot of their products are still sold there, right on the main square. It's right where the Christmas markets are held every year. And of course, Cappelletti, the family of which Maddalena and Luigi are the folks that keep the fires burning today. What's a lot of fun about working with Maddalena and Luigi is that they genuinely love bitterness. The Italian domestic market for these sorts of things is often likes things a little bit sweeter, a little bit thicker, a little bit richer. They're often drinking Amaro next to a pretty bitter espresso. But the palate and the skills and the history and the tradition of Cappelletti is very much more toward that bitter backbone, which is so important for us when we're mixing cocktails with their great products. Like a lot of producers, they have a lot of recipes, a big, thick recipe book, but they only make a few of those products for themselves to market, and the rest they make sort of once a year for the Christmas market or for their little shop, all sorts of different things. But their real focus and what we get to do with them are old traditional bitter recipes. One of the other things that goes through all of their products is that they don't really love caramel. We already talked about they don't love super sweet, but caramel in and of itself, something you see a lot in a lot of mainstream Amari, it doesn't work all that well in cold cocktails, we find. If you think about eating a Milky Way bar right out of the fridge, it's kind of the same thing. If you take an Amaro or a vermouth or an aromatized wines that's super high in caramel, it's going to make a cocktail very thick, and you may lose some of the nuance of the other things you've put in the drinks. A great example of that is Amaro Sfumato, which is dark, but it's dark not from caramel, but from rhubarb root, the natural rhubarb root tincture that provides all the smokiness as well to Amaro Sfumato. If you haven't tried that in a while, I definitely recommend you check it out. Another part of the history of Erboristeria Cappelletti is a penchant for wine-based products. And in fact, 3 of the products that we do with them are wine-based. And we talked about them being old, being pre-1919, pre-World War I. That was the case back then. If you were a small producer, you only had the ingredients around you, and distilled alcohol was pretty expensive. So in Trento, in the Alto Adige, they had wine, and they used it as their bases, and it created this great diversity of products, but also this products with wonderful acidity and brightness, which leads for us to mixability today. Today, we're going to talk about one of those products. So go ahead and open your bottle of Aperitivo Cappelletti. If you've got a bit of club soda around, this would be a great time to splash it in and make what we call a real spritz. Cappelletti Aperitivo is a red bitter. This is the world that's become quite burgeoning today. There's as many as 20 on the shelves of some bottle shops. The red bitter category stretches from very, very light, maybe even as low as 11% alcohol, things that are often used in spritz type drinks, to bigger, heavier, thicker, sweeter, more bitter liqueur and Amari that are often used in things like Negronis. What's fun about Aperitivo Cappelletti is it works in kind of both of those realms. It's wine-based, so it's got a lot of texture without a ton of sugar. It may come across as quite sweet, but it's actually quite a bit drier than pretty much everything else in this category. The wine also brings some acidity to the party, which helps make your drinks more refreshing. Aperitivo Cappelletti is also naturally colored. If you don't want to have red dye number 40 in your life, the traditional carmine coloring of Aperitivo Cappelletti is a great old call out to a tradition in the region, but also an expression of wealth and good taste all over Italy. We talk about Aperitivo Cappelletti in mixing both in both worlds of the red bitter. Spritzes, which we'll talk about a lot more when Lee comes on next. That word spritz doesn't mean one specific drink. That word spritz really refers back to the incredible craze for fizzy water and fizzy drinks in the late 1800s. The drink of leisure. But because that time was before 1919, a lot of those fizzy drinks were made with aromatized wines, and some of them were made with wine-based red bitter. So you see here a very typical spritz idea: Aperitivo Cappelletti and club soda. You don't need the wine in it for texture or for that vinous character because the wine is already in the Cappelletti, but a little splash of wine or sparkling wine wouldn't hurt at all. Now, the other side, of course, is the sort of bigger, thicker, richer stirred drink side. We think a lot about the Negroni and the Boulevardier. What's fun about Aperitivo Cappelletti in the Negroni especially is it just brings a delicacy to the drink. The acidity of the wine, the lower sugar, really allows you to taste all the ingredients in the drink really well, including the gin. If you make a big, thick, sweet Negroni, sometimes you lose that nuance of the gin or you lose the structure of the gin. So the other thing with that extra acidity and that extra brightness makes a Negroni that's really an aperitif cocktail, a Negroni that can get your evening started, get your meal started. You don't have to wait for it to dilute with ice for the sugariness to go down. So that's a very brief look at Aperitivo Cappelletti and a wonderful producer that we love